Welcome to another exciting episode of A Life Worth Being. And today, my guest, I'm going to be kind of a fangirl with this person because she is a woman after my own heart. She's amazing, and I know that you're going to find her as inspiring as I do. So, today's guest is the awe-inspiring Ruth E. Wilson. She's an Australian author, aviator, and true adventurer whose life is a masterclass in resilience, passion, and defying expectations. From being a beauty queen at 17 to a pioneering balloon pilot, Ruth became the first Australian woman to launch her own commercial ballooning company and the country's first national ballooning champion. Her adventures have taken her across continents and over the Swiss Alps in a hydrogen balloon at, are you ready for this, the age of 75. Ruth's memoir, Conquering Clouds, captures her extraordinary journey through the challenge and triumph. Her motto, passion within your soul is the flame that will light your way. So buckle up, everybody, because this episode is sure to lift you to new heights. I know it will me. Ruth, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on.
Oh, thank you, Sue, and welcome from Australia. Lots of love.
All righty, it is time to stop hitting snooze and awaken to a life worth being, the fun and inspiring podcast that dives deep into what makes life truly fulfilling. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, a self-proclaimed badass transformational life coach for women over 40. Join me as I explore the extraordinary journeys of ordinary people who've transformed their lives from the inside out. Tune in weekly to uncover the secrets to smashing through your perceived limits and creating a life that's not just well lived, but totally worth being. Welcome to another amazing episode of A Life Worth Being. And my guest today embodies those words to the hilt. My guest today is Ruth E. Wilson, and she has a number of amazing stories to tell us. And just you will be able to tell from her spirit will carry on to and through our conversation. So, Ruth, I'm just going to jump right in. And thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you. In so many ways, you have no idea.
Thank you, Sue, and warmest greetings from Australia. And I'm very excited to be talking with you.
Again. I have to preface this conversation a little bit. This is our third start to this podcast today. And you know what? Sometimes you get off to a rough start and that's okay. And you just got to go with it. And Ruth knows all about going with it. Don't you, Ruth?
I certainly do. My life has been one of stepping stones, one stone to the next stone, the next stone. So it's all good, all good.
Well, thank you again for your patience and your time. I do appreciate that. And I'd like to kind of start off. You talked about the stepping stones, and I do completely agree with you that if we are aware enough that those stones present themselves and they're, if you just go ahead and take that step, you're going to step on something, right? You're going to land safely, which you've had a couple of safe landings that you weren't so sure you were going to have. But how did you, I know, we sort of had a pre-conversation about you starting out, not as an aviator, but just starting out in life, and how something happened that, got you on your path of taking that step on the first stone. Do you want to tell me a little bit about whatever that was?
Well, I grew up in Bowen in North Queensland in a dysfunctional home, the eldest of 5 children, a mother not well. And my dad was a coal miner and we didn't have a lot of money. So it was a harsh life, and I had a lot of responsibility. But as a teenager, I dreamed of escape. And the only thing in the early 60s really was the Miss Australia Beauty Contest. And I dreamed that if I could win it, I could escape. And then the local Lions Club put on the Queen of the Coral Coast competition. And so I was 17, nearly 18. I entered, and I did plan the answers to what I thought they would ask, and I bought a new red swimming suit. I rode my bike to the beach, and without my parents knowing, because my father was very conservative and protective and possessive. Anyway, I won, and then I thought I'm going to have to tell my parents. But the prize was a trip to Hayman Island, our 5-6 star resort here in Australia in the Barrier Reef. There I met people from Sydney and made a few friends, contacts, and months later I moved. I went to Sydney for 2 or 3 weeks and just stayed, made the decision to stay. And that making that decision put me on to the journey I was supposed to be on, because then I moved to live in America and Japan, where I love living there for 5 years. I studied the language, the Ikebana, teaching how to arrange flowers, and just loved the antiquity. I got interested in the fact that there were more religions other than what I'd been exposed to really in Australia and living in America. And so from there, I moved to New Zealand, and as a journalist, I was asked to look for men to interview for a magazine. And I met one of only 2 new pilots in New Zealand at the time, and he was also a potter with some of these pots in Japan, in Kyoto. So I was really interested in that, and he kept wanting to talk about his hot air balloon. And then finally I stepped into the basket. But when I saw him turn the flame on to inflate the balloon, I wanted to do it immediately. And as we lifted off, I heard my inner voice say, "Ruth Wilson, this is your destiny. You were born to fly." And within a matter of 4 months, I had my first balloon. It was actually sponsored by Tupperware. That's the one.
Really? I didn't know Tupperware sponsored sponsored
Oh,
balloons.
they did 50 years ago in Australia. And I've owned 7 balloons, and so they've taken me to many countries, many landing in different places. I've flown over Alps and oceans and deserts, and just an amazing journey to go on. A lot of responsibility, a lot of joy, but a lot quite demanding too at times.
So how old were you when you got your first balloon, or when you first started flying?
I was 30.
Okay.
I found the balloon when I was 30. I decided to learn to fly fixed wing, a Cessna 172, when I was around 56, I think, from memory.
Okay.
I just love that too. And it's very different because, as you know, as an aviator, when you fly an airplane, there's lots of rules. You climb to 1,000, you turn left, all these rules. And there are rules in ballooning too. But because of the nature of the aircraft and the flight, the balloon becomes the wind. So whatever the wind is doing, the balloon has to go with the wind, not like it has an airplane when you've got an engine. And so there's also, in a way, an unknown destination, because at any time when you descend from one altitude to another, you can find a different wind direction. So it takes a skilled pilot to be able to get to that particular landing spot. Whereas in your airplane, your landing spot's the airfield or somebody's private airfield.
You
So
hope it is anyway.
I just love both. I love both, but mainly I got back to my ballooning because I'm passionate about gas ballooning, hydrogen ballooning, which doesn't happen in Australia, but in the Northern Hemisphere in America, it happens, and there's a big race every year, the Gordon Bennett gas balloon race, which first started in 1906 from Paris. And it's country against country, and there must be 2 people in the basket, but the pilot must be gas rated. And I just dreamed of doing that for years, and I decided in 1999 to take some of my savings and go to Albuquerque. And so I represent Australian, flew and land for about 602 kilometers, landed up in northern Oklahoma. Amazing experience. It's usually there's around 20 balloons from 12 countries every year.
Wow.
And it's usually the same people, guys who do it. And it requires a lot of funds, have the gear and all that.
So did
But
you
they
have to bring your own balloon and your own basket and everything, or did you, I mean,
I rented a very old balloon from a
okay.
pilot in Albuquerque, a 20-year-old balloon. And then when I flew in 2018 in Switzerland, in Europe, I rented a 20-year-old balloon from German Aero Club.
That sounds a little dicey to rent.
Um, you need millions to have the latest gear,
Yes,
so.
yes, I'm
But
sure.
I just really wanted and I'm fascinated at why some people have that need, that need to go on that extreme challenge and test themselves against nature,
Mhm.
climbing, high mountains and diving. I did diving years ago, but to go in this hydrogen-filled balloon with sandbags as ballast and try to fly for 2 or 3 days non-stop and overnight and that, it's become more amazing each year now because of now the technology. When I did it, the information from our meteorologists was sparse. And then, to be honest, and now the race they did last year went from France all the way down to Portugal. I mean, it's
Wow.
just an amazing race. And it's a special breed of people.
Yeah, I would say so. And you mentioned, what possesses people? Why do people do that? I mean, you obviously are one of those people. What drives you to do those extreme? And I do want to hear about your adventure because I know that it was one of your 7 lives that when you were crossing the
Yeah.
Alps. Yes. And but what do you think? What draws you to that type of adventure?
Look, I think about it a lot, but I go back to when I had my first balloon flight and I severed my ties with Earth and moved into the sky. I had an experience in bed that night where my spirit left my body and went back to other lifetimes when I saw myself in both realms. I could see myself lying there asleep in New Zealand in bed. I could see myself leading an army, coming back successful from battle, of different lives.
Wow.
And when I woke up, I had no religious background. We weren't even allowed to say grace at my home. So I was totally clean and honest and free of any thought. And I'm not sure if that helped, but I just had this incredible awareness that whoever this spirit was inside my physical Ruth E. Wilson body had lived had lived and experienced other lifetimes, and there was a collective consciousness for me to draw from now in this journey at this period of my life. And I lost the sense of fear, and that may sound arrogant, but it's my only explanation of how, as a pioneer, I did what I did, and I've done what I've done over 50 years. And particularly in those early days, there were no classes, there were no teachers, instructors. I became one to help other people learn to fly a balloon. And even in my corporate world, I've been a pioneer in whatever I've done. And I think that inner confidence must come from the lack of fear that I believe that, I mean, we do die. I know that we do shed our earthly body, but I'm not fearful of it. I'm not frightened about that. And it has given me strong inner strength, but confidence to take on the Alps, to fly over an ocean, to believe that I'm protected by angels. And I love the fact that at this stage, after 50 years in the air, that it's been vindicated. My belief has been vindicated.
Well, I know you've certainly had some close calls, and I would love it if you wouldn't mind sharing a couple of them with me, and one in the air and one not in the air for sure.
I'm not sure when I'm lying on my deathbed which one I'll think of, actually.
They'll all come rushing past you.
In 2018, in September, I was in the Gordon Bennett race I just spoke about, representing Australia. And the rules state that it's country against country, but 2 people must be in the basket, but the pilot has to be gas rated. And I'm the only Australian woman gas rated, and there are 3 men gas rated because, as I said, we don't do it in Australia. There's lack of hydrogen, but everybody wants to come here because of our vast country, because it's a long distance race. Anyhow, every year it's either in America or the Europe.
Okay.
And in 2018, I lifted off from Bern with my navigator, Tanis, who flies her own Spitfire. But she helped with the navigation, looked after that side of it, and just kept an eye on the map while I ballasted sand and kept the balloon flying level. So we took off at 10 p.m. at night to hundreds of thousands of cheering people. And I ballasted a bit of water, not sand, because you couldn't get it in their face or eyes, but a little bit of water, and then climbed to 15,000 feet, found the westerly wind, and then drifted across the snow-covered Swiss Alps. It was cold. I had 3 layers of clothing, a blanket over my knees, and a sleeping bag around my shoulders, and my teeth and my body shook and my teeth shuddered. It was incredibly cold. But I looked over the side of the basket into the tips of the snow-covered Alps, and I thought, what are you doing here, woman? You're 75 years old. You should be home. I thought, I think I better go home and write a book. And then when we approached Italy, I had to call for permission to cross the runway. Oh, no, to go into the control space.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want the balloon there. So they said, no, you have to descend 9,000 feet. And I didn't want to break rules or upset the organisers. And I opened the top of the vent of the balloon, a little bit of hydrogen out, so the balloon descended to 9,000 feet, shut the vent. And we found hell in the Dolomites. It was incredible. Those alpine thermals, I hadn't never been exposed to, but at one point I turned around. I was spending my time with a little shovel, shoveling sand out of a hopper bag as the pilot. Tanis was standing holding 2 bags of 10-kilo sands in the corner. And I turned around to my left, and there was the ragged rocks and the edge of the Alps right there.
Like right beside you.
I felt like I'd just lean out with my left hand and push off. That's how close we were. So common sense hit quickly, and I yelled 3 bags out. And I was shoveling sand, and she threw the bags over, and the balloon shot up perpendicularly to the mountain. And I just got my breath and got the balloon under control. And then there were other thermals, but not as close as that. And then coming towards us was this cloud, and I'd never seen a cloud like this in all my meteorology studies, and you would know in aviation where you're supposed to know these things, but there was a big donut cloud with like a circle hole in the middle, like a donut.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know what kind of cloud this is. And as the balloon goes into the cloud, or it's going to come over us, I don't know whether the hydrogen balloon will explode or what will happen. So I just prayed and I just surrendered to the point that it is what it is. And I stood there in the basket, didn't say anything to Tanis. I don't know we never discussed. I don't know what she was thinking, but Anyway, the cloud just whispered all around us, couldn't see anything. And then eventually it just went away. And it was such a relief to get through that. And then about an hour later, when we came off the Dolomites, I've got the Aviano NATO Air Base restricted below me in front of the track. And as you know, in aviation, restricted means restricted. And I thought, I couldn't care less. I've been awake for 33 hours. I've been flying for 18 hours. I'm taking on the Air Force. Anyway, they were very sweet. The guy just said to me, what are your intentions? I said to land as soon as I can find a big enough space. And there was silence. I thought, what is he going to say? Anyway, they just said land when you're through 2,500 feet, which means I'm down out of their airspace.
Yeah.
And I still have that vision of all those supersonic, I don't know what they are, those warplanes and early
Just taking you out after you make it over the mountains and through the clouds, and then an airplane comes by.
And so in front of me was the Air Force Base, the village of Aviano, all the vineyards, the mud flats and the Adriatic Sea, and where I'd lost a close girlfriend and her partner 2 years earlier in this race. They got hit out by lightning and got pushed down in and died in the Adriatic Sea. So anyway, eventually I saw this little space between the vineyards and between the vines, and I said to Tanis, we're going in there. And descended from 9 to 6 and then slowly pulled the red line and gently let the hydrogen out and a little bit of sand and came down and then finally found that little bit of wind that took me back over the tops about just a few inches above the vines, and then landed, I pulled the line, the red line, and we landed at the end of the vine, and the balloon just settled in that tiny space. It was such a sense of relief and achievement after all that time and responsibility, I guess. We just packed up the balloon envelope a little bit into a ball and threw our sleeping bags on the ground and just fell asleep until our 2 chase vehicles arrived that had been following us from Switzerland. And then the vineyard owner arrived, and that's all another story. It's all in the book. But look, it was just, and then so I've been really grateful that wasn't more negative experience is a nice way to say it. But earlier than that, in 1989, I was invited to go marlin fishing. I'd been living in Calgary, Canada, and I flew back flying balloons there. And I flew home just for 6 weeks. And I was invited to go marlin fishing at Byron Bay. And I thought, God's answering my wishes. I've always wanted to go marlin fishing. Why?
Be careful what you wish for, right?
Exactly. And so I got on this boat. There was the owner, the skipper, myself, and another balloon pilot, an American guy who lived up in that area who I just met, Sean. Pardon me. And so we start out, and then we get to the Ballina Bar, and then I didn't know sandbars or bars were dangerous. I knew nothing about the ocean. Anyhow, a 7-meter wave picked up the boat, threw it back on itself, split it in 2. I went to the bottom of the ocean drowning, and my spirit left my body and floated above me to the right, and it said, Ruth, see where your collar is. If you kick, you will find air. So I kicked and kicked. I broke the surface and I gasped for much needed air. And Sean swam towards me and we grabbed each other's hand, and then fate wasn't finished with us. We were dragged 3 to 5 kilometres out in the rough ocean.
My God.
I had my head was split open and blood was dripping on my left shoulder. I did have bad back injuries, but I didn't know that. I was in a state of adrenaline or whatever you are in those situations. And and I did learn a lot about energy, which I might share later when you're in the belly of a wave and on top of a wave and all that story. But after nearly 2 hours in this rough, cold ocean without life jackets, I saw the shark, the fins coming towards me, and I thought, I'm going to die by a shark. And suddenly I heard Sean say, Ruthie, they're dolphins, they're with us, we will be saved, through the cloud of my brain.
Uh-huh.
And it was a pod of dolphins, and they just encircled us, and they kept jumping around and dancing in a circle. And the rescue guys were way over near the wreckage trying to find us. And they saw the dolphins, and they sped over and lifted us out of the ocean. And while I was in hospital recovering, I had this amazing experience, whether it was a dream or what it was, but I was underwater swimming, and these three dolphins came up, and I had this mental communication with the middle dolphin and said, we want you to build this blue balloon. And they showed me this gorgeous royal blue balloon with golden dolphins on it. And I said, that's going to cost me $41,000. And they said, yes, but you've been given this and that, and telling me things about my life. Anyway, I woke up in hospital there, and I thought, I think God or somebody needs me to stay here in Australia. So I found a home in Byron Bay. I shipped all my things from Calgary. I had the balloon built.
You did. Amazing.
And then when I got the bill, the account, it was $41,278. And how do I know when I'm in that other state we go into that I could see the future of 41,000? Anyway, um, I don't mind sharing that story because it's true. And
So the dolphins were protecting you, it sounds like, from whatever other predators, and they also attracted the rescue people.
because I do remember hearing Sean say, Ruthie, try to keep kicking your legs. I'm exhausted. If you don't stay awake, I can't save you. I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
And I can vaguely remember that. So we weren't that much longer in that ocean if those dolphins had been cared enough to save us.
Yeah.
So, I'm very
So the least
grateful.
you could do was build a balloon to honor them, even for $41,000. That sounds like a bargain. They saved your
It's a
life.
lot of money in 1989.
Right, right. But the dolphins saved your life. So just saying.
That's true. Yeah. And I already owned four at the time, so I didn't need another one, but I couldn't help myself.
So when this is kind of a weird technical question, but now I'm curious. Is it the material that the balloons are made out is it like a sort of like a canvas, like a sail, is
It's,
made out of, or is it
no,
what's the material?
it's ripstop nylon. It's the same material
Okay.
on speakers on boats.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
It's quite thin ripstop nylon.
Okay. Right. But yeah. And so you can design something and then they just make the panels and put it together and stuff. That's really cool. They are so beautiful. And there are some where I live in the summertime, I see them up in the sky, and I've seen them when I've been flying. And then in Walla Walla, Washington, they have a balloon day where and it's just so amazing to see them all go up, and the colors it's just incredible.
Yes. I mean, you can design your envelope, well, the whole balloon actually, to whatever your budget is, really.
Yeah, everything's possible with time and money.
Yeah.
Do you still have any of your balloons, or have you?
No, I've passed them on. The one that I actually built Aurora in 2006 to do a world record attempt to fly long distance, 750 kilometres, support a new organisation in Australia at that time called Beyond Blue. It was to support people with depression and mental problems.
Mhm.
Particularly this promotion they were wanting to do was aimed at men. And my darling brother Ronnie was a Vietnam vet, and he came back with a lot of issues and eventually took his life. So it was something very meant a lot. It was very special for me to do. And I had that balloon until about a year ago. I passed it on to my friend's son, who's 27, wants to be a commercial balloon pilot. So it's, you know, still see her occasionally flying.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, I bet that's nice that you passed it on to someone. And like you said,
Yeah.
you still see her up in the air. And it sounds like you have a personal relationship with your aircraft, with your balloons. Did you name them all?
Of course.
What was your favorite? You
Oh,
have a favorite without making the other ones feel bad?
well, Tupperware bought my first balloon and they paid me enough money to fly it that I bought my second balloon. And then Kellogg's Just Right came along and bought my next balloon. And then I designed the next three. And I mean, they all had different emotional experiences with me. You know,
Mm,
like the first one was pioneering, learning things, and then the Kellogg's balloon flew in the bicentennial Trans Australia race that I organised and had 78 balloons for around the world come and fly from Perth to Sydney
wow.
back in 1988. Gosh, I did all that without email and mobile phones, and sometimes, you know, I don't really know it really how it happened, but it did. It was a pioneering event in ballooning around the world, and I'm still in touch with people who came and competed in that race, so that's amazing. But I think the last balloon, because it's, you know, still full of memories of flying with Aurora.
Mhm.
I mean, they're all like my children.
Well, I can imagine because it is a very intimate, you know, experience. I mean, it's you and the balloon and
Yeah, the squind in the sky.
yeah, yeah, and just that whole it sounds like, well, I know just from flying and but also my passion is horses and it's you know, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual and it is can be a very spiritual experience and it sounds like you've had many, you
Yes,
know,
definitely.
yeah.
So one of the things that I wrote in my memoir, Conquering Clouds, was a quote by Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, who wrote, "A man with a vocation will hear his inner voice." And so I finally saw that maybe 15 years ago. I read it somewhere and I was so relieved because I had heard at least 7 times my inner voice clearly tell me specific information, which was so important at that time in where I was going next or trying to make decisions. And I never really shared that with anybody because I wasn't comfortable with how they would react. But in the last couple of years, I'm comfortable telling everybody. And so I did put that as one of my little comments in the beginning of my book. And then about 6 months ago, I got this email, and I thought, well, it has to be from America because it said, "Hey, Ruth." Yeah, we say hi, Ruth, you see. It said, "Hey, Ruth, just read your book. I'm going to follow my inner voice from now on. Thank you. Loved it. Belinda." And I waited, I thought, oh gosh, wonder where she's from. So I waited a few days and I sent her an email, said, "Oh, thank you. Do you mind if I ask you where you're from?" And she said, "I live in Melbourne. I'm 15 years old and my dad's a pilot and he bought the book and gave it to me. Thank you." I was so, I was so
15.
shocked. She was 15. So we never know whose lives we're touching when we share.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think not only are you an inspiration for young people, but also an inspiration for women of a certain age. But I think that, you know, like my clients are 40 and up, you know, and I'm 65 and I'm still trying new things. And you're what, 82? And I mean, you've lived a full life and, you know, crossing the Alps at 75, like you said, you're like, what am I doing up here? Um, but
Yeah.
it's inspirational at any level. And if somebody that's 15 can get that message and start to listen to their inner voice and and follow, just like you did when you were 17. You're like, I'm getting that
Yes,
red swimsuit, I'm going to hop on my bike and I'm going to go to that competition. And that was
yes,
the start of the whole thing. Yeah.
exactly. But the lovely thing is, I taught myself to be a book publisher last November
I
at
love
80. And so when COVID hit, I decided to write my story, or more the story of the early days of ballooning, because I was about the fifth pilot, the first woman, that's for sure. But I've never really played the feminine angle in my journey, but it's everywhere these days about being female.
Mhm.
Uh, I've always felt that the skill and the knowledge was there for women and men to fly a balloon. And it certainly is these days. But I just decided that maybe there's only three of us still alive from the 70s. Maybe somebody should write about the history here in Australia of the sport. So I jotted down, I don't know, 90,000 words or something. But when I was at the Gordon Bennett in Switzerland, I met a lady who was covering a story from the National Geographic. She was American, and she was interviewing one of the other pilots from Switzerland, who's a friend of mine. And he said, and Nicholas said to her, "You should be interviewing Ruth. She's got an interesting story." And he rabbled on, and she said to me, "Oh, gosh, you should write a book, Ruth." And I said, "Well, I plan to when I find time." And then, of course, COVID hit. And she said, "If you ever write a book, I've got one of the top editors lives in London, a friend of mine.
Nice.
And it's always personal contact in my life, where one step goes to the other stone, as you say, stepping stone. Anyhow, I contacted Bella, and we worked together. Now, when she got my first draft, she was mortified. She said, "You've got 4 pages about you." I said, "They don't want to know about me. I had all my escapades and flights in Austria and Italy and America and Japan." And anyway, we signed a deal with her, and then it was hard work pulling out all my emotions, and then she'd send back, "But how," I'd write a fact, and she'd say, "But how did you feel?" FWL in big letters. And I'd go, "Oh, how did I feel?" And so, I mean, it was her skill that got me, because, I opened up and it's quite authentic. And I have had a couple of people say to me, "Oh gosh, you really bared your soul there." But I thought, well, a little bit. I could have gone even more, but so it's really interesting in how different people read and perceive stories, I've found. Mm.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you listened and followed her, because that is, I mean, the facts and all of the stuff about the early days of ballooning are fascinating, but it's your personal story and how you weave that into that really brings it all together and makes people, and I can't wait to get the copy of your book that I just ordered. So I'm very excited about that.
Thank you. So I'm hoping that we've got Mother's Day coming up in America and Australia, May the 11th, I think. I'm hoping that people might find it and offer to give it to, but I've been surprised at the number of men who've sent the responses on their reaction to my book. And I have done the second edition now. The first edition's out of stock
Mhm.
because that publisher disappeared and left 600 authors stranded. So I had to learn in November, teach myself how to publish a book and do it myself in December. And I've done all that. But I did add 3 pages at the beginning, and I could have had more, but I thought, well, that's enough. The different comments, and most of them are male.
Mhm.
uh, Read the book, and then there were lots of were females too, but they were kind of similar comments. And then I've added an extra chapter at the back because in September I was awarded the OAM, which is the Order of Australia Medal. And I've also put an author profile on my writing by history in the back. and changed some photos. So it's kind of the second edition, and it's under my name as publisher. And I'm very proud of that. So I go on.
What is the
Yes,
OAM that you mentioned? The Australia, what does that
it's
mean? What is that honor?
and the King's birthday, King Charles, in our King, they have a King's birthday honours list that's done every year for people who have done outstanding things for the community, and there's a lot of rules and about it all, and people nominate you that you don't know about, and it takes them 3 years apparently to go through all the comments that they'd say, and the government has to. There's a whole agency that does this in Canberra, and they apparently bring different people and all the whatever referees and say, did Ruth Wilson do this? Did she really? Did she done all that? La 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 la. And so you're either accepted for the award or you're not.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't know that this was happening until I got a message from Government House saying you'll be awarded the King's Medal in
Wow.
I went to Government House, and we were allowed to take I took four, my two sons and their two wives, and the governor, they pin the medal on, and there's a lot of pomp and ceremony and all that sort of thing. And but I tend to forget that I got it. But it is lovely.
It's a big deal. And you just kind of like blow it up like the OAM, yeah, blah, blah. Like, can you tell me what that is? That is a huge honor. That's amazing.
Oh, it's interesting, yes.
If I had asked you what haven't you done in your life, it would have been like a 5-minute episode. And because you also mentioned you had a corporate career, so I'm guessing that, I mean, you did own you started your own commercial ballooning company as well.
Yes,
But did
yes.
you also then have another corporate career outside of ballooning?
Yes. Well, I started my own ballooning business, and
Okay.
then I set up my public media PR company to promote ballooning and all my sponsors. And out of that, I got other clients, particularly in the complementary healthcare field. They came to me, and I did that for 6 or 7 years, and then they moved to Canberra and I was living in Sydney, and they wanted their executive director to move to Canberra. At that point, I wasn't prepared, but I also wanted to go and fly balloons in France. So I said, thank you, goodbye. And I went to Europe and did some ballooning and did other things. And then I came back to Australia, and that's when my brother took his life, and I was in Canberra flying at our annual event, and I thought, I think I have to move to Canberra for emotional support, because my majority of my close friends lived in Canberra, and I was grieving so heavy for Ronnie. So I landed my balloon, went to the real estate office and said, I want a house. So she showed me 3 or 4 houses. I said, I'll have that house. And 5 weeks later, I was in that house in Canberra. And so after 6 months of grieving, I thought, what am I going to do with my life other than fly balloons? And a neighbour that I just met said, I've got a friend, and they've started this, the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for Quantum Atom Optics at the Australian National University, and they need a chief operations officer. And I thought, oh, I can do that.
Not
So I got the job. And so the last 8 years I
another
worked.
stone in your path.
I lived in Canberra, and I drove, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes to the university, and I worked with Hans Bakur, the professor, who was the chief professor, and then 50 or 60 physicists all in their labs, tucked away, studying quantum atom optics and science for the future, and I loved every minute of it.
Wow.
And then we had a change of government, and there was no more funding for the centre, so the centre was discarded as my job. And I thought, I think it's time for me to retire, Ruth. Not that I've retired, but
I was just going to say, you're not sitting on the couch eating bonbons, that's for sure.
so anyway, that really ended my corporate responsibilities. But that
That's
was lovely.
flying, right?
Flying and traveling, and I just taken up croquet, just a bit of physical exercise.
I was just going to say, that sounds a little like, I don't know, compared to all the other things that you've been doing. Just taking up croquet. Okay.
Oh, dear me. Yeah. Anyway, but I live in a beautiful spot. I'm only a 2-hour drive north of Sydney, right on the water. And I've wanted to look at water in this chapter of my life. And I found it and acted on it as soon as I saw the situation. So I'm quite blessed.
I love that something presents itself. You're like, I'm going to go look at these 5 houses. I'm going to buy one and then I'm going to move in. And then that's going to be it. Now I want to look at water. I find a place by the water and that's it. And that's good. And no, but I love that. You're just very much in the moment, listening to your guides and your inner self, right? Your higher being, and just trusting yourself, trusting your instincts, trusting your guides, and being open to that.
Yes, it's like a knowingness, isn't
Mhm.
it? You can trust and believe. And I strongly believe that it's been a privilege and that it has carried responsibility. And I've tried to honor that intuitiveness and that wisdom. And at times, it's interesting because at times I've shared things with my 2 sons, and then if I have a moment maybe in discussion on the phone with one of them, even recently, he'll say, "Now remember, Mum, don't give your power away." I got noisy neighbours for the first time in my life. Anyway, no, it's lovely. And the other thing that I've really learned after all these years is there's 2 core emotions. There's love and there's fear, and which you choose which one. If you choose love, then you live a life of being kind and caring and sensitive and thinking about other people and giving. And then if you choose the fear energy, you're then into negativity and hatred and anger and being in drama. And I know it sounds simple to say that, but when I became aware and started to believe that, I was very conscious of not moving into the being unnecessarily angry with the driver who cut me off, things like that, and trying to say, oh, I guess he or she's having a bad day, I'll let them in. It's a choice we have.
Mhm.
And anyway, it's about watching my blood pressure levels.
Is there, can you think of a time in your life when you actually had a physical experience where positive thought, when you were struggling with positive thought or negative thought, and what effect it may have had on you, aside from the driver pulling in front of you and
Yeah. Did I share that about being in the ocean? Well, no, I didn't, did I?
no,
About
you said you'd talk about it later, but yeah.
right. So when I was shipwrecked, no, whatever it is, wrecked in the marlin fishing boat, and I was in the ocean, as I said, no life jacket, blood coming out of my head onto my left shoulder, kicking my legs, trying to hold one hand with Sean, flapping around, trying to not drown. So what I found that when I went down into the belly of the waves, which were deep, I would think positively and I'd say, now, Ruth, it's your responsibility. You chose to get on that boat. It's never mind blaming the skipper or somebody else.
Right.
There must be a positive reason you're in this ocean. And my body, the energy would just swarm into my body. and I'd feel so strong. And then my legs, I could kick and kick and kick and keep going. And then I'd go up onto the top of the wave, and panic and negativity and fear would drench me. And I'd go, I'll never find this little head in this huge ocean. Oh, I'm going to die here after all those years in the sky. I'm going to die here. The sharks are going to get me with all this blood. And every bit of energy I had caught like previously just drained away. And I was like a limp, raggedy doll. And I'd feel just exhausted. And next thing I go down the belly of the wave. And this went on for a couple of hours. And I didn't understand it at the time, but in thinking about it after the event a few times, I realized that if I had stayed in that negative, fearful energy all the time, I wouldn't be talking to you today.
Yeah.
I would have run out of energy and drowned. But, and so it taught me that incredible power of thought, which is really the only thing we have control over in our lives, our thought. And it's a strong message, and I would like to share that more, and particularly with young people who are facing all sorts of struggles these days, with bullying and all sorts of things.
Mm.
But it was as an experience to go through. I mean, we know ourselves, when you think nice, happy thoughts, you feel good and that, but to be facing your struggle to stay alive in such dire situations in the ocean, very cold, very rough, I don't know, loss of blood and everything. So I try to live by that. I
Yeah.
try to live my thoughts daily.
Well, and to have that actual physical reaction, when you were having the positive thoughts, you would come to the surface and then you'd be like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. And then you go back down, and then so that you actually did have a physical,
Experience.
sensation and experience to calibrate and say, okay. And now when the idiot pulls in front of you, you can choose to, flip them off and yell and get mad, or you can just be like, have a nice day.
Yeah, just give
What are
me a
you gonna
smile.
do? Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yes.
funny. And it really does. What you focus on grows. So if you're focusing on negative things, and I think now you alluded to it, and especially in America right now, our political situation is very challenging, and every day is, another day of hell in the Dolomites. And you never know when you're going to crash into a sharp rock or whatever. And it's so easy for people to get sucked in because the media is so in your face about everything. It's constant barrage, and you really do just have to, you know, close down and not pay attention to it and not get sucked into all that negativity, because it will eat you alive, literally.
And I have to tell you, it's our media here is swamped with it also.
Yes, I apologize. I'm sorry.
No, but I lived in America and I traveled there almost annually to fly, and Canada. Both those countries have been a huge part of my journey, and I have a deep love for both. At one point, I thought I'd either live in one or the other permanently, but the accident with the dolphins and that brought me back to Byron Bay, and I still travel there, but. And I do struggle with emotion and concern, and we're being affected in this country too. Don't
It's
worry.
global. It is
Yeah,
global.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
So it's good for you to know that there are other people out there who care. Definitely,
And I do
definitely.
think that, people like you, people like me, and the people that we can touch with our messages, that we can raise that vibration, raise that positive vibration and overcome, hopefully, the lower vibrations that are out there. And
Yes,
the
definitely.
more we take care of ourselves, the more positive we are within our souls, we can it's that ripple effect, right? If I can affect someone, if I can, like you said, someone reads your book or hears your message or whatever, they're going to then share that with somebody else, and they're going to share that with somebody else. And we don't know, like you said, with that young girl that wrote you the note, um, we don't know who's hearing our message, but there is someone out there that is hearing what we have to say and the energy that we're putting out there, and it's going to resonate. And that's my greatest hope for doing this podcast and talking to people like you, that we can affect change. And it may be small change, but I do believe that we can affect change and have that ripple effect of positivity. So, I mean, we're not perfect,
I
but
agree with you, and it's needed more than ever. And
absolutely.
I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude and joy that I've met you and we're having this conversation, and I do appreciate the time. And one of the things I remember years ago thinking, I mean, the love and passion I've had for my flying is so intense. And I thought, now at the end of my life, I want to be able to say, have you found joy, Ruth? And have you given joy to others? And when I was writing my book, I sat for a while. I went to the beach and sat quietly looking at the ocean and said, thank you, you didn't take me. I was angry. Finally, I said, thank you, you could have taken me. And I thought, yes, I can say that. And I'm ready now to move on to another journey or life, whatever's the next that might happen for me, because through my basket, my balloon, I've shared with thousands, and I've never done the passenger ride paying business. It's always been through sharing and in a beautiful giving way. So thousands of people have shared my basket in many countries. And also, of course, I've found a lot of joy through my flying. I mean, at times it's been demanding and also very, very expensive, but I've always said you can't put a price on pleasure, but I can now when I look at my bank account. But anyway, you have to be.
$41,278 or whatever. It's probably one of the lesser expensive ones.
Exactly.
But yeah, when you think about it, it's like, you could have spent that money doing something else that didn't matter as much to you and didn't give you those experiences that you could then share with other people. And, I do believe as well that if we can be more giving than consuming and holding things, just being selfish, and not being judgmental about other people that have things and resentful, be happy for what you have and share what you have with other people. And if it's an experience, it's an experience. If it's money, it's money. Whatever it is, we all have something positive to share with someone else.
Yes. And the lovely thing for me is the memories.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, so many. Can imagine all these different people have stepped into my basket, and different ones come to mind and different stories. And when I was living in Byron Bay with my dolphin balloon flying, I already owned two others sitting in the shed. My colleague's just right, and another one. This family booked a flight for their mother for Mother's Day, and they turned up at the launch site at sunrise. And when she saw the balloon, she was terrified. More, she said, "Oh, no, 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 I don't like heights. I'm not going." I mean, she was shivering with fright. And the family was saying, yes, mum, and all this. And I said, look, Mary, I can't remember her name, but Mary, I'll tell you what, why don't I tie the balloon to some ropes to the car? You hop in the basket. We'll just go off the ground, 10, 20, 30 feet. And then if you don't want to go in the basket, we'll come down we'll come down and take the ropes off, but you don't have to go. Anyway, she reluctantly climbs into my basket. And so I gently take the balloon up, and she looking out at the horizon. She didn't even realize we'd left the ground in her own funny way. When she looked down, she wasn't frightened at all. And so I was able to bring the balloon down. We undid the ropes and a couple of other people got in, I forget now. But we went off and had the magical flight around Byron Bay, and the family were there. They chased and they were there at the end. And I mean, I often think about that woman, how she grew or changed, how if it changed her in any way. But there are so many. I could probably write a book on the people I've had to
Yeah,
share.
I bet. I bet. Well, there you go. I mean, you definitely have a lot more books than you, I believe.
Oh gosh, yes, I think so.
It is true though. I mean, it's even like getting to know somebody, like if there's a person or a type of person. I had a guest on my podcast earlier today who is transgendered, and she said, you know, she's very much about having those conversations and allowing people to ask her questions because people don't understand, right? So that's a little bit different, but it's the same thing, kind of the woman climbing in the basket. She didn't understand what it was going to feel like and what she was going to experience. And then she realized, oh, this is not so bad after all, right? And I think
Yes.
we have a lot of those preconceived ideas
Well,
that we
it's
make.
lack of knowledge and also fear of the unknown, which is a big
Absolutely.
thing. I mean, it's human nature in a way to fear the unknown, but so many stories of people. And I have a lovely story. I flew in Albuquerque in 1981. Everyone in America, I'm sure, knows about the big Albuquerque balloon event there at the end of the year in October. And I've flown there 6 times over the years, but this first time in 81, and the last flight I landed on an Indian reservation,
Hmm.
and we were allowed to do that in those days. I don't think we can these days, but I didn't have a lot of gas left in the tanks, but this family ran over, and the mother had this 19-year-old son who was blind, and she said, can you take him for a flight? And I said, well, I don't have much gas in the tanks, but I can just go up and go down to the end of the paddock or the field, whatever I called it. So he hopped in and he started feeling around his hands, the tank, and she was talking to him and all that. And there were other little children running around and people. And I just went up and a little bit off the ground, I don't know, 50 feet or something, and just controlled the balloon while we slowly flew down. And they all ran after the basket. They landed, and they were so happy. And so I came back home to Sydney, and about, I don't know, 3 to 4 weeks later, I had an amazing experience. I woke up at 3 in the morning, and hovering in the bedroom was this American Indian brave sitting cross-legged with three feathers in the left-hand side of his head.
Uh-huh.
I looked at him and I just said, hello, what are you doing here? There's this feeling of this white light and a feeling of love, and he eventually faded away. And then I eventually went back to sleep. But I thought, I know a few days later, I was thinking, now hang on, there was something I wanted to do. And I thought, I'm not sure if I can do that, Ruthie. It might be not for me and difficult. I was a bit insecure about something. And I thought to myself, hang on, if you can see Indian spirit, you can do whatever you want, woman. I thank this person, whoever it was, but I just think somehow I think it was because I was kind and did that with the Indian family few
Yeah.
weeks here. I'm not sure, but it's nice to have these stories that I can tell myself.
Well, yeah, and I love that wake up with these, having had these experiences in your
Yes,
sleep or as you're waking up or whatever, because you clearly are getting some very clear messages, like with the dolphins. The
yes,
American chief or whoever was, the spirit was coming to you. And you honor them. That is the most important part. You
yes,
you
definitely.
honor your guides.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
that's
think I'm not sure if I mentioned, but in the acknowledgements in my book, and you go through everyone and all that, but at the last one I said, and I want to thank my angels who've surrounded me and kept me alive, other than it would be the case or something like that. So I thank them at the end of the book.
I'm sure they appreciate that.
Oh, dear me.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Oh my gosh. Wow. You have had such a full, amazing life. And I mean, it's just, I can feel it in your stories. I can feel it in your energy. I can just feel it in your being. And it was funny because I hadn't even met you yet. And Christine told me about you, and I was like, oh, I have to meet this woman. I just knew it. It was like one of those things. I'm like, okay, there's that stone, go for it. And I said, I need to get her on the podcast. And Christine hooked us up. And then you were in our mastermind this week, and I got to see you in person on Zoom. And I'm just so grateful that you had the time and the opportunity and were willing to share your beautiful stories and your beautiful life with my audience. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to meet a kindred soul, I tell you.
I know
Oh,
I have to come to Australia. I'm telling you, I've been having all these connections with people in Australia and New Zealand and everything. So I'm thinking that I might have to come back. I've been wanting to go back to Australia since I was visiting for the millennium in 2000. I just thought it was a beautiful country. The people were amazing, and everyone was so kind. Just a really silly, quick story. We were there for Christmas, and we went to the beach. I think we went to Bondi. We took the bus. There was nobody. It was like Christmas Day or the day after Christmas or whatever. There was nobody on the bus. We were taking the bus back to the train, and it was getting later, and the bus driver we were the only ones on the bus, and he said, it can be a little dicey maybe, and I don't want you to go down into the train station by yourself. He got off the bus, locked up the bus, and walked us down to the train stop. I was like, wow, nobody would do that in America. They'd be like, bye, see ya.
yes.
It was a really fun experience. But well, I could talk to you all night, and we have almost done that. I do appreciate your patience with our technical difficulties and everything, but to me, it was so worth it to talk to you and to get to know you better and share your story and your energy and your just beautiful sense of self with my listeners. So
I'd love to hear from anybody. They can contact me on my email through my website.
Yes, and I will have I will have all of your contact information in the show notes, and it's ruthewilson.com.
Yes.
Okay.
And yes, it's lovely. This next chapter of my journey, it's about writing, and now that I'm down to earth, it's about writing and sharing and traveling still and meeting like-minded kindred souls.
Well, if you're ever back in the States, please let
It
me know.
won't be for a while. It won't be for 4 years.
Yeah, I hear you. And well, you may see me before I see you. But yes, please do continue to
You'll stay in touch.
yes, and continue to send your message out to the world because the world needs you more than you know. So I appreciate you being here. And to my listeners, if this episode has resonated with you, please share it with a friend and get in touch with Ruth because I know that this is an episode that I'm going to listen to over and over again. So I hope you feel the same. And Ruth, thank you again for being on the show. And to everyone else, thank you for joining us. And I will see you next week for another episode of A Life Worth Being.
And thank you for being you. Bye.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Life Worth Being. I hope you found it fun and inspiring. And to avoid a bad case of FOMO, please be sure to click that subscribe button. If you love what you heard today, please share it with a friend and then hop on over to your favorite podcast platform and return the love with a wonderful review and 5-star rating. It would truly mean the world to me. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and on my website. Links below in the show notes. I appreciate you, and I will see you next week for more fresh insights on awakening a life worth being.